For 18 years, a single woman lived in total isolation on a barren island in the Pacific Ocean, without tools, without community, and without any promise that another human would ever return. Abandoned in 1835 on San Nicolas Island, she survived relentless winds, scarce fresh water, and the crushing silence of being utterly alone. As storms erased tracks and years slipped by, she unknowingly became the last living member of her people. This is a true survival story, not about escape or rescue, but about endurance, memory, and what it takes to remain human when the world forgets you exist. She would later be called Juana Maria. The name was assigned after her rescue, drawn from the conventions of the world that finally reclaimed her. Her real name, spoken in her own language, shaped by the culture of her people, was never recorded. It vanished along with the Nicoleño tribe, erased quietly through violence, disease, and forced removal. When she was abandoned on the island in 1835, she became not just a solitary survivor, but the final living representative of an entire people. She likely did not know this at the time. What she knew, with devastating clarity, was that she was alone. San Nicolas Island lies isolated in the Pacific Ocean, roughly 61 miles off the coast of Southern California, a long, narrow landmass shaped by wind and water rather than human intention. Exposed to constant ocean gales, the island has a cool, semi-arid climate, with frequent fog, limited fresh water, and little natural shelter. Vegetation grows low to the ground, sculpted by wind and salt, while steep cliffs drop sharply into restless seas. Life there has always required adaptation. The surrounding waters, however, are rich. Dense kelp forests sway offshore, supporting fish, shellfish, seabirds, and marine mammals. Seals haul out on the beaches. Abalone cling to rocks in the tidal zone. The island offers abundance, but only to those who understand its rhythms and its constraints. Before Europeans arrived, San Nicolas Island had supported human life for thousands of years. The Nicoleño people lived not easily, but expertly, extracting sustenance from a harsh environment through accumulated knowledge passed down over generations. They fished the kelp beds, harvested abalone from tidal pools, hunted seals on the beaches, and crafted seaworthy vessels capable of navigating open ocean. Their isolation had once been a strength. It protected them. That protection collapsed in the early 19th century when Russian fur traders arrived with Aleut hunters, drawn by sea otter pelts worth enormous sums in international markets. The Russians brought violence and new diseases. The balance that had sustained the Nicoleño people for centuries was destroyed in a few decades. By the 1830s, their numbers had plummeted catastrophically. Those who survived found themselves cornered, economically dependent, politically powerless, and increasingly vulnerable. In 1835, Spanish Franciscan missionaries decided to remove the remaining Nicoleño to the mainland. Their stated goal was protection and conversion. Their execution was careless. A single schooner arrived off San Nicolas Island to collect the survivors. Accounts vary, but all agree the removal was chaotic. A storm approached, tempers flared, people scrambled to board the ship with what little they could carry. When the schooner finally departed, it left behind one person. Whether she was overlooked, whether she jumped ashore at the last moment, whether she was searching for a missing child, remains uncertain. Later stories embellished the event, but historians generally agree that the truth is unknowable. What followed is not. When the ship disappeared beyond the horizon, the woman stood alone on the island. She may not have been entirely alone at first. Some accounts suggest she had a young son with her for a short time, possibly until he drowned while attempting to cross rough waters in a small canoe. If true, the loss would have been absolute, severing her final human bond. After that, there would be no one left to speak to her in her own language. No one to share labor, memory, or grief. The silence would be total. Survival under those conditions required more than luck. It required competence bordering on mastery. Drawing on cultural knowledge internalized since childhood, she built shelters from materials scavenged along the shore. One structure was constructed using the rib bones of a massive whale, likely beached long before her arrival. Driftwood, grasses, and earth filled the gaps. Other dwellings were made lighter, movable, adapted to seasonal changes. Each placement considered wind direction, exposure, and access to food. She made clothing from bird feathers and seal skins, carefully stitched with sinew. Sewing without metal needles is slow, exacting work. Mistakes are costly. Stone tools must be reshaped constantly. Bone needles snap. Everything wears down and must be replaced by hand. Archaeological evidence confirms the care and intelligence with which these objects were made. They were not desperate improvisations. They were precise solutions refined over time. Food came from the sea and the land. She harvested shellfish, caught fish, hunted birds, and took seals when circumstances allowed. She dried meat in the wind to preserve it and timed her gathering to tides and seasons. Water, scarce on the island, was collected from rainfall in natural rock basins or stored in containers fashioned from available materials. She learned, through repetition and attention, exactly how much she needed and how little she could waste. The physical labor was relentless. But the greater threat may have been psychological. Complete isolation is a form of pressure rarely encountered in the modern world. Without feedback from others, without shared language or social reinforcement, the mind begins to fold inward. Many documented cases of extreme solitude end in hallucination, despair, or madness. She endured. Evidence suggests she sang regularly, songs from her culture preserved through memory alone. She spoke aloud, possibly to animals or spirits, possibly to herself. She marked time using carved sticks or notations, small attempts to impose structure on a world that no longer acknowledged her existence. These behaviors were not signs of instability, but strategies, methods of maintaining identity when no one else could reflect it back. Years passed. Storms battered the island. Bones whitened in the sun. Shelters were rebuilt. Tools refined. The seasons repeated themselves again and again. No rescue party came. No ship altered course to investigate the island. On the mainland, the Nicoleño people who had survived relocation died of disease within a few years. Unknowingly, the woman became the last living archive of their language, their stories, their way of life. In 1853, nearly 2 decades after her abandonment, Captain George Nidover, a sea otter hunter operating along the California coast, heard rumors of signs of habitation on San Nicolas Island. The stories were vague but persistent. Intrigued, he organized an expedition. When his men landed, they found evidence of human activity, shelters, tools, food remains, but no person. Only on their final night did they see her. She had been watching them, silent, cautious. When she approached, she carried roasted wild onions. It was an offering, a message that required no translation. Communication was nearly impossible. No one spoke her language. She spoke none of theirs, but understanding passed between them nonetheless. She sang, a song later remembered by one member of the crew, and loosely translated as an expression of contentment, of readiness. After 18 years of solitude, she chose to leave. She was taken to Santa Barbara, into a world louder and denser than anything she had known for nearly 2 decades. She lived with Nicolas and his family. People came to see her, drawn by curiosity and pity. She examined horses, tools, clothing, architecture, objects utterly foreign to her lived experience. By most accounts, she displayed curiosity without fear and calm without resentment. She did not speak of suffering. She did not perform trauma. Her body, however, faltered. Within weeks, she became ill. Accustomed to a narrow, protein-heavy diet, her digestive system could not tolerate the abundance she was offered. New foods, new bacteria, new pathogens overwhelmed her immune system. Dysentery is the most likely cause of death. 7 weeks after her rescue, she died. The irony is difficult to ignore. She survived 18 years alone in a hostile environment, only to perish shortly after returning to human society. Her resilience, forged through deprivation and adaptation, left her vulnerable to the sudden excess of civilization. Before her death, the woman who had lived nearly 2 decades alone was formally baptized by a Franciscan priest and given the Spanish name Juana Maria, the only name by which history now knows her. The ceremony marked the first and last time her identity was officially recorded. When she died in October of 1853, she was laid to rest in an unmarked grave at the Santa Barbara Mission Cemetery, buried among strangers because no one could understand her language well enough to record her words or wishes. A brief entry in the mission's burial records noted only that she was the native woman brought from San Nicolas Island, baptized shortly before death out of uncertainty rather than understanding. For decades, her resting place went unmarked. It was not until the early 20th century that a small memorial plaque was installed at the site, an attempt to acknowledge a life that had passed largely unnoticed by history. The physical traces of her survival did not fare much better. Several items recovered from San Nicolas Island, water containers, clothing, bone needles, and other tools she had crafted by hand, were once held in museum collections, but many were destroyed in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and the fires that followed. One of her most remarkable possessions, a dress made from cormorant feathers, was reportedly sent overseas for preservation and study, but it vanished from records and was never recovered. Decades later, her story resurfaced through literature. Scott Odell's novel Island of the Blue Dolphins introduced a fictionalized version of her survival to generations of readers. Archaeologists later confirmed many elements of her story through material evidence left behind on the island. Whalebone structures, stone tools, food remains, proof that she had lived, not as a myth, but as a human being solving practical problems day after day. Her story endures because it resists comfort. It is not a triumphal narrative. It does not reward negligence with redemption. It asks unsettling questions about abandonment, colonial violence, and the fragility of cultural memory. And it offers no explanations, only facts, silence, and survival. She did not seek isolation. It was forced upon her. That she endured says less about heroism than about refusal. The refusal to lie down and disappear simply because the world stopped looking. For 18 years, she chose to live. And that choice, made repeatedly without witnesses, remains one of the most compelling acts of human resilience ever recorded. If stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you see the world differently, consider supporting the channel. Like the video, subscribe, and join us for more true stories of survival, resilience, and the extraordinary limits of the human spirit.